Okay, it is my absolute pleasure and honor to introduce today the amazing Christian Henson. Christian is a prolific composer working mainly on TV, film and game soundtracks. He's the co-founder of Spitfire Audio, a British music tech company that produce high-end sample libraries. Christian came up as a drum and bass producer in the 90s, even dipping his toe into the porn industry as a music composer. He's worked on projects such as Assassin's Creed, Poirot, Biggie and Tupac, and Alien. After connecting with fellow composer Paul Thompson on MySpace, the pair founded Spitfire Audio, which has in the past 10 years collaborated with the likes of Hans Zimmer, Olafur Arnalds, Eric Whittaker, the BBC Symphony Orchestra, and he also destroys pianos in his spare time. Christian Henson, welcome.
Thank you so much. That's quite an extraordinary intro.
I'm so delighted to have you here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Gary.
It's a real honour to be chatting to you today. How's your lockdown been going?
Well, I think something I said to a lot of fellow composers is it says a lot about our quality of life over the last 20 years that our lives haven't changed at all. And everyone who's had to kind of live our lives a little bit has found it incredibly egregious. So, yeah, I think if anything, it's opened my eyes to having lived in a lockdown for 20 years and how one should maybe change that a little bit.
Or maybe we were right all along, we were preparing for this moment. Just lock ourselves away with our toys.
Exactly.
But sorry, go ahead.
No, but it's been for me personally. I've been for the last 5 years what's known as a Willie, which stands for Work in London, Live in Edinburgh. It's a thing. We recognise each other on planes and trains like dogs. And what's been good about it is I've actually reduced the amount of travelling I'm doing, which is not good for health and family. So every cloud has a silver lining.
Amazing. I actually just saw there on Instagram you put up a picture of Spitfire North.
Yes, absolutely.
So is this a new building that you guys have moved into pretty much?
Yes, we're just building a team up here to help me interface with London more on the assumption that I'll be travelling less. I've also I create a lot of YouTube content, and up to now I've been editing all of that myself. So just a bit of assistance up here. But also what we really want is, I said to our CEO, we've got a really young crew of like 80 people in London. So seeing as they're youngsters, maybe they can come up and visit me. So one of the perks of the job at Spitfire is going to be able to spend days or extended periods up here in Edinburgh, which is a wonderful city to work and play in.
Field trip.
Exactly.
So I saw on your Instagram as well a post you put up of this incredible Logic session of a soundtrack you're working on. I was like, whoa, that's big. But one thing you put up about it was you said that you were doing a statement of intent to camera each morning, and I found that really interesting. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, basically, what I've done is I've agreed to do this film score, but we've written into my contract that I'm allowed to do an in-depth, actually I would call it a kind of a meta dive into the process, and to be able to use the footage. One of the difficulties with learning this craft online is that people can't really use the footage, so there's some awkwardness there. So what I'm planning to do is basically, what I am doing at the moment is I basically start the day just talking about what I'm going to do, looking at the scene, and then I really do need to concentrate on the compositional aspect. So I put the computers off, and at the end of the day, I bring people up to date with where I've got to. So to give people a really in-depth view of the entire process. I'm doing this with a friend who's a director I've done a couple of films for already. So we've already established a lingua franca, a trust. And because he's got me on board really, really early, I'm hoping to show what an ideal process would be. So I'm getting to work writing up themes to provide for them as temp whilst they're shooting, which we know is what we'd all like to have as a luxury, but it is a luxury. So just hoping to, because I think one of the main things as a composer, a film composer, is not actually composing. It's we're heads of department. And in so saying, it's down to us to guide production through that process as much as it is for them to kind of specify when they need certain kind of delivery requirements. one must presume, after maybe doing films for 10 years, that most directors you'll work with would have worked on a fraction of the number of productions that you as a head of department would have, so that you're there in a sense to bring your experience on board and to help guide them through. So, for example, on this show, it's the first time an editor's had a temp suite to work with, a toolkit of stuff. And that's me going, well, I have experience of doing this before, and I think it can be a great way of building up a language and a kind of sound world and getting stuff signed off. So that's the experience I'm bringing to this.
So when you say a temp suite, is that like actual sounds that they have access to that they can experiment with themselves?
So just 1 moment. I'm just going to switch off Slack because it's making a lot of noises and it's horrible. So basically, what I do is I think that the process of being a head of department tends to completely overtake you as a composer. And I think writing music is a very special space you need to be in your own head. And I'm not talking about taking your theme and putting it to a scene. Now, I'm talking about actually sitting down and writing it. So what I've afforded myself is a period of maybe 2 months to sit at a piano and write some themes. And then I've created what will be my template for the piece. I always do a new template for every show that I do to create a sound world. And what I then do is take the themes and the sounds and put them together to contextualize them for the director. At this point, we open the collaboration. And provided he's happy with the direction, I then break this theme suite, this one is 16 minutes long. I break it up into its constituent parts and stem stuff out, so that inevitably one stem will have some horror stings or some scrapes or some bangs, as well as maybe a piano stem and a string stem.
Wow! So your idea is to sort of get that stuff into the director's psyche a little bit as they're filming. So I think one of the biggest challenges we face as composers is the eternal battle with the lords of temp, and a temp score being temporary music that they will. An editor will grab and put in. My two least favourite forms of temp are temp that you can recognise, because what will happen is you have a pre-existing emotional reaction to that music, whether it be American Beauty or once someone temped a thing I was working on with Clair de Lune by Debussy, and they said, I want something like that, but more moving. And you want to say, well, you go and tell Debussy to write something more moving. But it's moving because you have an emotional connection to it. And the other form of temp that I really dislike is when they temp with my music, because I think that's how you kind of create sort of, it's bad for the DNA gene pool, the music gene pool in my mind. So I think that the only answer to fighting temp is to try and get in there as early as you can and fend it off at the pass. So for me, also when directors like what your opening gambit is, they get a sense of ownership over it and a sense of it being unique. And I think the idea is to before a producer even hears anything, is to try and get it into your collaborative work with the editor. It's more time consuming because you're on the show earlier, possibly producing more music that's going to be used. A lot will hit the edit shop floor, if you know what I mean. But I think that it's one of the most successful ways to collaborate. But I think the way you work now, Christian, is like you are such an educator and you share a lot of things on YouTube and the process. I think it's very forward thinking of you to actually bring it into a contract that you're allowed to share and teach to this. I think that's a big change of 2020 now. We're able to peek behind the kind of Wizard of Oz curtain a lot more than ever before now, aren't we? And I think maybe that could be a thing of the future,
Absolutely. And I think that really there is more demand and there are more points of sale, if you will, in inverted commas, for music than there ever has been by an order of magnitude. And I think it's just really important to get people, as I say, being a composer is something that you can have that skill, that wonderful talent can be innate in you. But to develop an ability as an HOD is about gaining experience, and by watching other people work is an excellent way of gaining that experience. But I feel very passionately about the future of media composition being a very rich one, because, I mean, particularly with these lockdowns, people are finishing Netflix now. So Netflix are biting people's arms off for traditional content, and I think it's not traditional for new content. And I think it's really paramount that we keep ourselves front and centre of the craft form and continue to prove that music written to picture is better than just music taken from any old source and slathered. The concept of developing themes and attaching themes to characters and all of that kind of stuff, I still think ring true.
So true. But I mean, I feel like now in 2020, like, and we're talking about sort of everything being blown wide open. I mean, do you feel those traditional sort of bars that you need to hit in terms of like musical theory and having a musical theory background, do you feel like now people are able to, you know, work in the industry and not necessarily have the traditional backgrounds that they would have once needed, say, before?
I wish we could do away with the title composer. I really wish that it was more commonplace to be referred to as head of the music department, because that's what you are. And that's what the job is. And that is an enormous, amorphous mass of tasks that need doing. And there tends to be quite an oteristic, and because for practical reasons and budgetary reasons, us as heads of department have to fulfill a lot of those roles. So within all of those roles, there'll be certain skills that you can bring to the table. I bring programming to the table because of my drum and bass past. I'm great at writing porn music, if porn is a thing. But what I don't bring to the table is any theoretical knowledge, which I think is just whatever you can bring, lean in on. And I also would say that, I really respect people who go to music college, and I really respect people who have come from a theoretical angle. And that's something they can bring to a table. I mean, look at someone like Ben Valfish. I gave him his first job in movies, and he became a hugely successful orchestrator. I wouldn't say kind of production and his ability to use a compressor was particularly a strong point that he had. Theory was. And he found his route into working for Dario Marinelli via that route. I found my route into working with Harry Gregson Williams, which was my break, by being okay at programming Amon breaks. So I think that theory's great, but it's not necessarily something you should fear if you don't have. And I've written countless orchestral scores without a formal knowledge of orchestration, nor indeed theory. I just think it's a different angle to come in at. Something that you'll be familiar with in your part of the world, which has been an amazing thing for me to experience up here in Scotland, is you get great violinists who come from a non-theoretical, non-reading, kind of is it an oral tradition? I guess it is, where it's learnt by ear. And it's amazing. They develop the same skills, the same ability to play the instrument wonderfully, but it's just from a different angle, and that's fine.
Yeah. Wow, amazing. Tell me this, as a head of music department, the way you say, I like the way you're talking about leaning into the things that you're good at. Is it also very important to, acknowledge what you're not good at and find people to become part of a team that can help to make it the best possible full picture?
Absolutely. I think that where completing and delivering the score, which is your fundamental job and what you're paid for, doesn't necessarily have to be good. The producer will not pay you if you don't deliver a score. And I think that you have to make sure that things remain on budget. And there you do need expertise, I think. So it's very good. I rely heavily on orchestrators. I would say I always share the orchestration credit because I am physically voicing everything on my door. But turning that into music, particularly the way I give it to my orchestrator, is quite a thankless task, really. So yes, I think lean into that, and I think that, they say, I can't remember who said it, but someone said style is defined by your deficiencies, and I think that whenever I meet a guitarist and I hear them slamming out Hans Zimmer ostinato, you're just like, you play the guitar. Like that's a great angle, and I've said this so many times to guitarists. Why don't you apply like guitar voicings to your orchestration? So actually lean in on the fact that you might orchestrate something wrong. I always like listening to Eric Satie's orchestrations because he clearly was a total mental and just did whatever he liked, didn't follow the crowd. And I think that's great. Something that I'm really enjoying on this project, Gary, is I don't feel I really have anything to prove anymore. So I just came up with something that was a 3-note theme. And I just went, I'm just going to dare to be that simple. And it was the first thing the director picked up on and said, thank you. I don't want it to get any more complicated than this. And what it is, it's just me facing up to my own abilities. And 3 notes is about
that's where it bottoms out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, that's hilarious. So let me ask you another question, because we're composers and we're audio fans and nerds and everything, and you're a person who has got an exquisite collection of toys in the playpen, for sure. Let me talk to you about gear acquisition syndrome, and when the pursuit of more toys outweighs the pursuit of actually getting some stuff done. Have you ever encountered that yourself, or have you any thoughts about that?
I do. I think it's really, really important not to let the acquisition of equipment block your sense of being able to achieve success. I think a lot of people use it possibly as an excuse of, I'd love to become a composer, but I need this and I need that. And once I've got that, then I'll start. I think it's just bollocks. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear. I think the first thing most people should buy after getting a computer and a door is a microphone, so they can just start making sounds with stuff they can buy in a pawn shop or charity store. Porn with an A and a W, I mean. So there's a theme here.
There's a theme emerging, yeah.
Yeah, or a charity store. If you want to create your own sound, which should be all of our ambitions, then it's just go, if you've got an interesting sounding Hoover, go and sample that. I do this series called Creative Cribs on YouTube, and I always try and make an effort with the people that I interview, going around looking at all of their kit, always say, but none of this is necessary, and they always agree with me. I think that the one thing I regret is I have bought a lot of equipment, but it was my daughter came in, I was homeschooling in my shared studio during lockdown, and she just looked at my massive wall of vintage synths and went, Dad, I've never seen you actually play any of these. Are they just for show? And I just went bright red. Because, of course, I think that there is a degree of validation that you can get to a point where you are achieving your dreams. And I think for most of us, I met up with a composer called John Upstead the other day, and he said, I basically built my synth collection around the back cover of a Herbie Hancock album with him playing in this amazing thing. And I think that's our dream. Our dream is to sit in a place full of knobs, and I think that there's a degree of validation that is positive for our mental well-being there. So
yeah, I agree. Let me ask you a bit of a nerdy question. So what I did, there's a group actually on Facebook of fellow nerds, and I said, look, I'm interviewing Christian Henson. Do any of you have got any questions? And one person asked me this question to ask you. So here's his question. It's in the last 15 years, orchestral sample library realism has improved significantly due to improvements in computer processing, hard drive size, etc. In 15 years' time, what ways will Spitfire be making use of emerging computer processing, cheap file storage, etc., to make better libraries? Will it be offering more round robins, higher bit rates, more articulations? How can Spitfire keep coming up with something better? Where is the room for improvement?
Well, I think that we're always learning. I think that basically I don't see our recording sessions as sample recording sessions. I always say this to musicians, that we see them as recording a performance one note at a time. And our ability of working with musicians is something that we're still honing. So that'll always improve. We recently replaced a library, Albion 2, because it was just too shonky, and re-recorded that. And we're amazed by how much more pristine and inspiring the sounds were. But to be honest, what interests me as a composer, someone who doesn't want to replace using live musicians, is the emerging styles in orchestration. If you compare what is popular today with what was popular 30 years ago, it's entirely different when looking at orchestral scores. You know, if you compare the sound of Bernard Herrmann's era with the sound of Hans Zimmer's era, they're very different. And I'm looking forward to being part of that evolution. Something that we've really embraced is these very kind of quiet textures and this kind of Scandi noir. And I think that's one thing that we want to do, is continuing providing choice, possibility and inspiration to people. And of course, we will put more microphones and more round robins and keep developing our legato technology. But I don't feel that kind of comfortable about like trying to make musicians obsolete. It's for me, this is the starting point. We're the conduit between musicians and composers.
Fantastic. I want to talk about the Westworld competition very quickly. Caused a bit of controversy, I know, because some people weren't happy with the winner. They felt like it was too simplistic, and it caused a bit of an online backlash. I know you addressed this a lot in your YouTube video, where you talked about being brave and style, and how it's about individuality, creativity. The question I want to ask you really is, is there a new sort of social landscape with internet users now, where companies meet the community and consumers, and do companies need to tread lightly now in this new kind of terrain? Is the internet like the Wild West a little bit?
Well, I think there's something I'm really, the one thing that really broke my heart about the controversy was the immediate switch the dial to cancel. So it wasn't people going, I think I personally think the winner was excellent. I'm really glad that he's made a YouTube about it, because it was clear that he researched it considerably more than most people did. So a lot of people go, oh, I didn't watch the rest of the series. I didn't realise the context of the piece and stuff. But it wasn't that people were disappointed and were airing their points of view. It was because we weren't agreeing with their points of view, we were now cancelled in their eyes. And I will not buy into this new thing that social media does, which is create dogma. I think that's very, very dangerous on all levels of society. So what I'm taking from the Westworld experience is I'm going to actually repeat it, and I'm going to make it worse for people. And that may sound incredibly arrogant, but I think it's really important to understand that that's what it's like in the real world. You will present something you think is perfect, and then you'll see what got the gig and go, what the actual fuck, And so I'm currently doing a little mini series on my YouTube channel where people are going to get to write to some factual material, and I'm going to throw them every kind of curveball I've received in my career to see how they get along. That was the most disappointing thing. If there was one thing that I regret is, and it was out of our control, is because of COVID, we couldn't really document the judging process. And what people didn't get to see was the huge behind-the-scenes efforts, which were, immense. It was a massive team of people who were having to listen to the same scene over and over again. And I think one of the things I was slightly saddened by was the homogeny of music that we were faced with. And so, it was, the winning piece really did stand out. Yeah.
Gotcha. Interesting. So, it was funny...
Sorry, that's the thing. The thing I want to drive home at every step of the way is finding your own voice is one of the single most difficult but important things to do. And, that's why the people who are winning the awards are winning them. The Mandalorian score or Hilda's score on Chernobyl, they're just thinking out of the box.
Was there a point where you were sitting there and this tidal wave started happening and you're kind of going, oh shit? Because it's easier in hindsight to see where the crest of the wave was, where it finished. But I imagine when you're in the thick of it, it's a bit like, this is a bit mad.
I'd recently had dinner with Nitin Sawhney, who had a Twitter storm, and he said that he went to bed for a weekend and it was horrible. And I'm like, is it really? But it really is horrible. I wouldn't wish it upon anyone. And ours was relatively small, but I wouldn't wish that upon anyone, because, we are humans, and by whatever means, hate is hate. And that's what I feel that particularly my position at Spitfire is I put a lot of work into the community. And to have that binary switch go for me was just so alarming. And it's the world that my children are growing into. And I guess that we're going to figure it out. But it's just that the problem is if you don't agree with a screaming minority and do apologies and reverse opinions and all of that kind of stuff, you're cancelled. And that was so alarming.
It's hard to know where it'll go. I often wonder, will our grandkids turn around and remember this era as like, how were people active? It was like where society met social media and technology and they didn't know the perils of it just yet. And maybe there will be some sort of a revolution or some sort of an acknowledgement that this is, it's just too big for us,
Yes, I think that the way it'll go is it'll become more. I think that we live part of our lives on a totally new planet that is being ruled by people that we haven't elected. 3 or 4 companies, and Twitter's run by a bloke. And it's fortunate that for centrists like me, tends to be aligned with their points of view, but that's not guaranteed in the future. And I just think it's likely that this free, boundaryless place will probably not be that way forevermore.
So true. I want to talk about what you do. Like Spitfire always struck me when I first heard of you was through labs, and I looked at the page and I was like, all of this shit is free. Like all of this is for nothing. And I looked at it all, and it was all so beautifully. Sometimes when companies put out a free taster, it's a second thought. It's sort of, they don't really put a lot of care into it. But everything you do, like the artwork is gorgeous. It's so beautifully recorded. It all has a story to it.
Thank you.
It reminded me of like getting an old vinyl and like looking through the liner notes. The way you always break it down and talk about it. I think the labs is an amazing thing that people should be aware about. That Spitfire offer a lot of free stuff. But I think you really set the bar when you put out the BBC Symphony Orchestra Discover, which was a lot bigger. Was there any marketing people in your ear going like you're mental?
No, marketeers are okay with it. I mean, the thinking behind it was there was a period very early on in sampling where people would like keep their hard drives like this. You can't have my samples. And then, particularly when I started making them, I just started sharing them with mates. And you get these little communities of people who share samples. Go, I did this mental thing with a Snapple bottle. Check it out. Certainly myself and my brother and a few others. And I just thought that'd be a great way to build a community, is just to share stuff that was kind of not like, it didn't sound like a preset that you get built into a door or, something that was built into a synth. It was just a bit different sounding. So that was the thing behind it. And so Labs became hugely successful. And when we were talking to the BBC, I said, I think we should give a version away for free. I think we should make it truly, we have emails from people like in Bangladesh using Labs saying there's just no way, because of the difference in how the economies work, there's no way they could even dream of using any of our software. So it gives the opportunity of that. And I said, if the BBC really wants to inspire a generation and to open up Orchestral to all, then we have to open it up to all. And so there was 2 things. One, needed to make it free, and 2, we needed to make it small. So it's 200 megabytes, which is insane for an entire symphony orchestra. And I simply said my pitch to the BBC and to my board of executives was, this is a deathbed moment. You'll be lying on your deathbed and go, we did that. And why, if there's an opportunity to have that kind of reflection in one's life, why not do it?
It's like a legacy. It's like the person that the bench is named after in the park. They've got a little, it's just like something exactly like you said, a deathbed moment. You'll remember that.
I lost a parent. Well, I lost my dad last year, so I think I'm thinking a lot more about more. No, I appreciate that. So I'm thinking a lot more of legacy and mortality and stuff like that. And I just think that just looking back on how I started out, is I had this professor who just basically slammed my dreams and with my fingers. The shutters came down, and it was just like, you don't have the theoretical knowledge, you don't have the desire to make atonal avant-garde music, so you're not welcome here. And because I didn't have the internet in those days and didn't realise that, Irving Berlin couldn't read music either, I just went, okay, that's it. And I've stumbled into my career, but really if I'd really followed his recommendation, I'd be at a point in my life now where it just wouldn't be as amazing as it has been. And I think that if you're going to be in music, working with orchestras, it's one of the most amazing achievements you can have, even if it's on your laptop.
Well, it's great. I'm glad, because you definitely haven't turned your back on education, considering that professor was such an a-hole. But you Spitfire sponsor a bursary. So I am the very fortunate recipient of the Spitfire Bursary Award from with Tyler Education. So I think it's incredible how much you give back and how much you do for budding musicians, producers, composers. Are there any other areas you would like to support in the future, or things that you're passionate about that you feel are worth supporting?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we are in fact going to be. We're actually making several hires to create a proper educational platform. That's something that we believe passionately in. I mean, we don't talk. I would say to the marketing team, you're too modest about what we do already. We support Safer London, Magic Breakfast and Saffron. But also something that's really important to know about Spitfire is I think it's about 25% of our turnover goes directly back to the musicians and artists involved in making the sample libraries. So you're supporting a new revenue stream for musicians who are dearly strapped at the moment. So it does find its way back to them. And, we distributed, I think, 2.5 million in royalties last year, and it's likely to be 3 something this year. So it's a substantial amount of money that's going back into the music industry. I come from a show business background, and my grandfather set up Actors Equity, the actors, what's it called? Union. In this country. And so when I teamed up with Paul Thompson, I said, you do realise you're with a union lad here. So from the very outset, I said, we've got to cut everyone in.
Wow. Let me ask you something slightly different now. Like, you started off, and you still are a film and media composer, which is obviously a very solitary vocation. Was it difficult to make the leap into the business world and begin a music technology company? I mean, did you have formal business training?
No. I just genuinely believe if I was ever to do a seminar on being an entrepreneur, it's just never ever set out to make any money, and that's the surefire way to.
And you'll never
success.
Be disappointed.
Well, I just think that's what I just keep on saying. Is at the central core of what we tried to do was just we just questioned the way things were being done. Thought we'd try it out and just see if we could get enough money in to create a sample library for ourselves. And I do think if you start a business and you're at the minute you're starting your business, you're working out how to make money out of it, you are immediately putting yourself in a conflict of interest with your end user or your customer. So I think it's first about creating something magical that people want to be a part of. And I have no interest in being a businessman, which is why we've kept Spitfire private. And we've had lots of overtures of investment and IPOs and all of that kind of stuff. And it's like, well, no, because we won't be able to do Composer magazine, and we won't be able to do Creative Cribs and all of these things that don't seem to generate any income, but naturally they do, because they broaden our horizon, the people that we communicate with. And then, we've just got to make sure that what we're doing is at the highest possible quality, really.
Now, I won't keep you too much longer, but I just have a couple of final questions. So how do you stay sane in the creative industry? Are there days that you're composing and you just say, everything I'm making is shit and it's not good enough? And how do you look after that side of things?
I've got a very simple solution to that, and that's just get up and go out for a walk. And I think you need to do it every single day. I think that there is no way you can be at all subjective about what you're doing if you're just doing it all the time. So I now have quite a convoluted system of designing my schedule so that I can leave things and leave them for a good amount of time, overnight if possible, and review them before submitting them, before coming to my own personal conclusions. I think that in the past, I probably chucked a lot in the bin that was probably quite good, simply because I was fighting my demons or had lost my way. And I think, looking after yourself and getting exercise and getting rest is very, very important, because you need to maintain a degree of self-analysis and subjectivity. And I think that what I found out when I became a dad, I mean, I just couldn't understand, I was literally working 360 days a year, if not 365. And I couldn't work out, there's no way I could give up my weekends to be with my child. How's this going to work without ruining my business? And lo and behold, taking the weekends off, I was twice as productive during the week. The worst place to actually be truly creative, and for me, creativity is ideas. The worst place is in front of what is basically a posh typewriter stroke spreadsheet machine. And I was listening to, what's the name of the director who directed A Gear, Wrath of God? Robbie, what's the name of that director? The guy we just saw on Mandalorian, his director. Werner Herzog. No, it wasn't. Sorry, it was David Lynch. I was watching an interview. I do hope you can edit this, Gary. I was watching an episode. I was watching an interview with David Lynch, and he said that ideas. It's like fishing, and in order for these ideas to come, you need to sit and be quiet, and be patient. And he said, the really big ideas are like really big fish, which are deeper down in the body of water that you're either on in your boat or sitting on the bank of. And I thought that was very useful because it also, for me, it taught me something very important about giving yourself the opportunity to have these ideas, which I don't think happens in front of computers, but also that when you do have them, you respect them. And I think that's something else that if I were to replay my career is allowing people to treat your ideas as if they weren't hard fought and patiently sought.
And do you, like, at the end of your composition, when you've created something, do you always hand it over to a mixer? Do you mix everything yourself?
So, for example, I'm working on an amazing ongoing TV franchise called Inside Number 9, which is, and I think now we'll be doing the 6th series that actually went into hiatus for the lockdown. I mix those. So when time doesn't really allow or budget, but whenever I have a budget and can do, yes, I'll always work with an engineer. I mean, I'm quite a good engineer myself, but again, subjectivity is just down the toilet by that point.
Yeah. Yeah, you're listening to like the same thing over and over again. It just becomes mush, doesn't it?
Yeah, and you focus in on the bits your ego is attached to, which often for someone like me who's untrained will be something that I think is a clever piece of counterpoint. Wow, I never thought I'd hear myself do that. So I'd nudge that out. And then you come back 6 months later and you go, I can't hear the melody. Bloody bassoon.
I remember Greg Wells saying a really interesting thing. He said, if you listen to something over and over again repeatedly, all of the wrong stuff sounds normal. He's yes. Like he's so big on just being objective and leaving and coming back. And he's Absolutely. Like, you need to get away and get a clean, fresh set of ears.
That is the key thing about working with an engineer. They may not they might not make what you could have done 100% better, but they give you the ability to leave the room, come back and judge their work. And that's my biggest advice to working with engineers. For God's sake, don't listen to an engineer. Just wait for them to present it to you.
Yeah, awesome. Couple of final questions. Technology has opened up huge opportunities for creatives today. How important is it for people to widen their skill set beyond music composition into areas like video editing, which I know that you are involved in quite a bit, in this new landscape of basically creating content? And how important is that for people to get their names out there now?
I think it's a very good way of getting your name out there. It's a way of people understanding who you are. I think one of the most fantastic aspects of me editing my own YouTube videos for the last 3 years is actually understanding the power of music. There was this, I walk on this old volcano that's in the middle of Edinburgh called Arthur's Seat, and there's this incredibly operatic reveal on one of my walks, and I thought I'd film it, and I got it back, and I was so underwhelmed by the image compared to what it's actually like in real life. And it suddenly made me realise, put a bit of the old choir on. There you go. So it's been helpful. It's been helpful for me to understand how difficult it is to balance dialogue and music, and that's been great. But I think, all of these. I mean, the other thing that I would say I would really advise media composers to look into is doing dialogue editing and sound design. I think being able to provide YouTubers, it's the biggest broadcast platform on the planet, 6 million creators, with some of these YouTube creators getting far, far bigger viewings than massive TV shows. And they're going to be wanting one-stop, quick turnaround, people who can do everything all in one, dub the whole thing. So I think that possibly concentrate within the realm of sound, and that'll cross-fertilise into what you're doing with your music as well.
Great advice. Where is the Gimp now?
The Gimp, I kept the lid. I kept the lid.
So for anyone listening who doesn't know, the Gimp is a piano that was subjected to the most horrendous abuse by Christian, all recorded, of course. It suffered for its art, but you got this piano after basically miking it up and beating the bejesus out of it for quite a long time, and then you hoisted it up in a ginormous crane and just dropped it.
Yeah, 60-foot crane. I think I'm going to follow up with a study into the trope of dropping pianos in movies. And I think the reason why people drop pianos all the time in movies and cartoons is it's a really easy sound effect to make, because you just put the sustain pedal down and go bang, like that. But the thing is, you need an intact piano to make that sound. The minute the tension has been removed from the strings, it's not going to make that sound. So it was it just sounded like a kind of cardboard box exploding. It just was.
I remember listening to that and I was like, "Oh, this is going to be amazing," and it dropped just with. Bleh.
What was incredible was it exploded, and I think it's very kind of visual way of understanding the tensions that is involved. And I think this is something that's interesting about pianos is they are mortal, because the soundboard, which the dulcimer is basically attached to and what resonates, in order for it to resonate, it has to be held in this kind of curve, which is tons of pressure. And eventually it just lets up. And that's why pianos don't tend to live beyond 100, 150 years. So it was interesting to see those forces in action, because it hit the ground from 60 foot, which is a fair old height. It hit the ground and just literally exploded.
It was pretty awesome to see. A bit of a philosophical one. What was the best advice you were ever given?
That's an easy one, and it wasn't that long ago. It was at a point where I was being overtaken by some people who I felt were junior to me. That's going to happen to us all, and I didn't admit to this person that I was struggling. We were just talking about stuff. And I think it's something that he struggled with. And he said, I realized recently that this is not a race. And it was literally all of that fear was lifted from me. And he's, of course, absolutely right. And it was Harry Grayson Williams.
Wow. Great advice.
I think it is true. And I think that composers judge our own success by two very unhealthy things. One is, how we're doing in comparison to other people who are all on a totally different trajectory. And secondly, by how hard we're working and how tired we are and how many days it is since we last had our day off or got a full night's sleep. And I think that's terrible, because that's not the way the people who pay us judge our success. They judge it on the work that we do and doing it successfully and being a nice person and getting on with people in productions. And I know a lot of fabulously average composers who are hugely successful because they're just wonderful people to work with. And that is our job. We're heads of department first, composers second.
So true. Last final question. This has been such a blast. Thank you so much.
It's an absolute pleasure.
What do you think? What are the next 10 years looking like for you? Have you got any goals? I mean, what's in the future? What would you love to happen?
It's funny. I've read somewhere that something happens to us when we start kind of into our late 40s. We want to. I think it's a mortality thing. It's suddenly like having to go, right, okay, guys, this is how you survive. This is how you look after your young. All this kind of stuff. So I would like to continue working in the community. If I were to share a total ambition, which may be a pipe dream, is I'd love to set up a network of recording studios that didn't have CPUs in. to give people the engineering opportunity to thread tape, but also for bands and for artists to experience what it was like to have those moments of reflection whilst your tape rewound, and to think about getting the recordings right without adding just loads of plugins. It sounds old and fuddy-duddy-ish, but I just think it shouldn't be a lost art. And I think that if I was to say, and this sounds ridiculous because I'm a sample developer, there's something that I think's not been particularly great for music is the computerization of it. And I think that I can see a lot of younger people really returning to, I think it's why the folk scene is so alive at the moment, returning to true humanity in music. I think that we face a crisis with AI. And I think that if we continue making music that sounds like it's made by AI, then of course we're going to lose. But we're working with these traditional musicians up here in Scotland, there's no way AI would ever get close to that. Never in a million years, because it's based on centuries of learned continuum experience, if you know what I mean. So for me, it's to be active, helping the community and possibly building a studio or two.
Boom. Well, more power to you. And I guarantee you'll document it all along the way. And I can't wait to see all the videos.
Absolutely. It's a funny, you said, I'm sure you'll document it all. Actually, when we did the Gimp drop in Aberdeen, I took my kids and we went to a pub for lunch afterwards. And because of social distancing, my kids had to sit on a separate table. And I overheard my 8-year-old daughter saying to her friend, my dad would do anything for content.
Kids know how to cut right for the core, don't they? Oh, that's incredible. Oh my God. Amazing. It has been such a pleasure. I appreciate your time so much. And I mean, I love the idea of Spitfire North. I hope it absolutely flourishes around you and all the juniors get their field trip up to Edinburgh.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully you'll swing by too, and then we can fiddle around with my spaghetti synth machine in my shed.
Amazing. We might even drop a piano.
Exactly. Brilliant stuff, Gareth. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'll talk to you soon.